Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement announcement. We're happy to provide this webinar today on behalf of the Farm Service Agency and Scott Marlowe, our Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs, as well as Zach Ducheneau, the Administrator of the agency. Today, we're going to walk through an exciting opportunity. We hopefully will be joined by our Deputy Administrator in just a few minutes. But today, we're excited to provide information on what's coming. And Alan has a lot of info to present on the opportunity that's before us to submit new or modified project proposals. And I won't take much of his time. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. My name is TJ Wilson. I'm the Deputy Director for the Conservation Division here at FSA. So thanks again for joining, and hopefully we'll hear from Alan and Scott here shortly.
Thank you, TJ. It's my privilege to be able to talk to you today about some wildlife conservation. Not only wildlife conservation, we're going to talk about a program that helps implement wildlife conservation on private lands, the Conservation Reserve Program. And so I appreciate everybody taking the time to spend a little bit of their afternoon with us to talk about the Conservation Reserve Program and a certain initiative, the SAFE initiative. My name is Alan Lang. I'm a natural resources specialist for the Conservation Division of the Farm Service Agency. And I currently have responsibilities for the SAFE program as Jenny Green, the person that you probably all know of as the CRP program manager that has had responsibilities for SAFE program. She has taken an opportunity, a great opportunity with the Climate Smart Agriculture project. And so Jenny will be joining that team. And until someone else is appointed permanently, I will be handling SAFE. And so if you got SAFE questions, you want to talk about SAFE, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Alan?
Before we get, yeah.
Oh, the Deputy Administrator, Scott Marlowe, has joined us. We
Excellent.
can turn it over for a welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Alan. Thanks all. Thanks, Jennifer. I just wanted to welcome everybody here to this webinar. We're excited about this opportunity for us to have new and updated SAFE contracts, and to create this is a part of our ongoing commitment to voluntary conservation, to extending the flexibility and creativity of our conservation programs. And I want to also be clear that I just really want to express my thanks to all the staff who've worked on this. And this has been in the works, and appreciate all of the work that's been happening both here and with all of the folks in communities. I know that this has been, as we're growing this program, as we have this opportunity to extend signups and to enhance the contracts we've got already. This is an important area of the work. This is very much in keeping with the administration's strong commitment to conservation, to extending conservation opportunities, and to finding new ways of voluntary and creative conservation. So I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. Thanks to all of the staff, and welcome to this webinar. And I look forward to hearing the remarks. And as always, we really welcome everyone's feedback. Please be in touch with us. Let us know as you go how it's going. We take very seriously all of the feedback that we get from folks in the field who are on the front edge of this. And with that, I'll hand it back over, and we can go on and get to the meat of the matter. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you very much for taking time to open our meeting today, Scott. We'll continue on with a couple housekeeping items. So this meeting is being recorded. You might have seen that notice come across your screen. And so that recording is going to be made available for those people that aren't able to join. And for those that are joining us via the recording, thank you for very much for taking time to listen to the recording. Please ensure you're muted. Everybody's done a great job at that so far. And you'll have a chance to unmute your mic and ask questions at the end. We'll make sure that we reserve some time for that. But in the meantime, if you've got other questions that you'd rather type in the chat, please feel free to do so, and we will be addressing those questions at the end of the presentation, the end of this webinar. Take a little bit look at the agenda today, what we've got teed up for this next hour, talking about the Conservation Reserve Program, SAFE. And so we'll go through some of the background of SAFE so that we all kind of get ourselves centered on what SAFE is and the opportunity that we have in front of us. We're going to talk about some current SAFE enrollment, some changes that happened in 2021, some significant changes that affected SAFE. We'll quickly review a few CRP policies relative to SAFE, and the notice that posted yesterday, CRP 966, which is something that we'll go into detail on. And we'll talk about how to submit modified or new state acres for wildlife enhancement proposals. And as I just mentioned, we are going to make sure we reserve some time for questions as well. Judging from the time, it may roll over the top of the hour for a little bit, getting into questions, but we'll try to keep it as close as we can to ending at the top of the hour to be respectful for everybody's time today. Our background. State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement is a conservation reserve program, CRP initiative, that began in 2007. CRP, as all CRP is, administered by FSA. Of course, SAFE is also under that umbrella, administered by FSA, with the technical lead being the Natural Resources Conservation Service. SAFE is a partnership between state-level FSA and sponsoring entities. It addresses local wildlife habitat needs to target restoration of critical habitats. Now, if that doesn't get you excited, we'll take a look at the next screen. SAFE is a popular conservation reserve program opportunity, and we've got about 2.4 million acres enrolled in SAFE, and you can see on your screen too that it's broke down between the different SAFE practices between CP38A, B, C, D, and E, buffers, wetlands, trees, longleaf pine, and grasses. And so we'll go into those different SAFE practices here a little bit later, but just to summarize, CP38 is the SAFE practice. That 2.4 million acres enrolled in SAFE constitutes 11% of total CRP enrollment, a significant enrollment amount. On your screen now is a map of locations by acres of where SAFE contracts are located. So kind of a heat map, we call it, of the frequency of contracts and acres. So I'll give you just a minute to read that map. Okay, so it kind of shows where participation around our nation is. In the next map, and I'd like to shout out to David Taylor for him using his talents with GIS to be able to come up with these maps. David also made us a map of all the active locations of active projects. And so these are states that are engaged in one or more active SAFE projects. And the outlined locations on your screen are those areas where the project is taking place, the areas where land is eligible for the SAFE projects. Okay, good looking maps. We had to include a few of those. I mentioned earlier there were some significant changes in 2021 that impacted SAFE. And so before we go on with the current opportunity to submit new proposals and modifications to current proposals, let's talk about that a little bit. And so last year in 2021, SAFE moved from the general sign up to continuous sign up. There was also adjustments to the rental rate, and they were adjusted, rental rates were adjusted through the soil productivity index, as well as a 10% inflationary adjustment to that rate. The incentives were also, SAFE was also impacted from some incentives that were applied to SAFE, the climate smart rental rate, the water quality rental rate for buffers and wetlands, signing incentive, and practice incentive. We'll take a look a little bit more at the incentives on a slide I've got later. I just kind of wanted to highlight and remind everybody of those changes that happened last year. CRP policies are contained in a handbook called 2CRP. If you're not familiar with it and you're thinking about either putting in a new proposal, submitting for a new proposal, or if maybe you've been handed duties at your state level for SAFE now and you need to dig into the policies, on your screen is a location where you can find 2CRP. There'll be several slides that I'm going to reference some of the policies within 2CRP, and so it'll be important that you be able to navigate yourself to those locations. And I'll also mention, though, that if you're a partner thinking about either managing a safe project that you have or submitting new, your partners is your state farm service agency office. And so become familiar with who has responsibilities for CRP in your state and use that person to help you answer questions. But with a Google search or with a search on the internet, you'd be able to find 2CRP, and I have it highlighted with an arrow as being the Agricultural Resources Conservation Program. Within 2CRP, an important part of the handbook is Exhibit 11, which is the National CRP Practices. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that portion of the handbook. That's very important to understand and know what that is if you're going to be involved with State Acres for Wildlife Enhancement. So what's going on in 2022? As I mentioned just recently, a notice was posted, CRP 966, titled Request for New or Modified Safe Proposals. Proposals that are submitted and approved will become active in 2023. And I've got a little clip on your screen there of what that notice looks like that was posted yesterday. If you haven't seen the notice, if you don't see it in your email inbox, there's certainly a way to get to it. And I wanted to kind of leave a breadcrumb in this presentation today to help you find where those are located. And so I've got it circled on the screenshot there that you can go to the Farm Service Agency homepage, laws and regulations and notices. And then you can see on the bottom of your screen how you're able to navigate to the location of those notices. And again, this is 966. The presentation that I am giving right now does not replace the information that is in 966. So please, if this is something that's interested you or you're already engaged in, please get yourself a hold of that notice and read it and let me know if you have any questions. So we'll go through the notice and I'll highlight some of the things, some of the content within it. So on your screen now, I've got some of the highlights of the purpose. And this is an opportunity to submit new proposals or modify existing safe projects. And so currently we have 35 states that are participating in 65 different projects. And so this is an opportunity for new to be submitted and also for those that are active to modify and submit their existing safe projects. Within the notice, there's instructions and criteria for submitting new or modified proposals. This notice also authorizes additional NRCS conservation practice standards. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Authorizes the use of annual plants for early successional habitat. It also authorizes cost share and a payment incentive at time of re-enrollment when transitioning cover. All those things I have slides further on the presentation that we'll talk about a little more in depth. So policies that are located within this notice, first of all, is land eligibility. Eligible land for Conservation Reserve Program safe is cropland, and cropland according to 2CRP. So there it is already. I'm already citing things from 2CRP, and that eligible cropland is according to paragraph 151 in that handbook. Eligible land is land that's located within the defined safe project boundaries. We looked at a map a few slides ago that showed the active safe project boundaries state by state. And to be eligible to participate in SAFE, you must be cropland according to 151, but you also have to be located within the defined SAFE project boundaries. Now, marginal pasture land is not eligible, but it could be. It could be if it's really needed for a threatened endangered species. And if marginal pasture land is something that a proposal includes, it'll need to be justified as to why marginal pasture land is a habitat or is a land use that needs to be supported with a SAFE project. Earlier, I mentioned that SAFE is a Conservation Reserve Program practice, and all Conservation Reserve Program practices have a CP, alpha, and then a numeric code. So CP 38 is SAFE. And so you'll see on your screen on the left side that there are 5 different practices for SAFE. A, B, C, D, and E. And those are buffers, wetlands, trees, longleaf pine, and grasses. As you move to the right of the screen, you'll see the authorized CRP sub-practices. So the sub-practices are those that are eligible under the safe practice. I know it gets a little confusing. There's a lot of CPs going on and things like that. And if you have questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out. But on your screen is what the safe practice is and what sub-practices are eligible for those said. Incentives. So I hit a slide a few ago that showed that there was some incentive changes that happened last year. And notice 966 has those incentives in them, but rather than posting anything from 966 in this presentation, I wanted to show you something that is paragraph 66 in 2CRP, which is a great reference for the practices and the incentives that apply. And so if you have questions or if you're wondering what incentives such as a signing incentive, the payment incentive, and per acre rental rates that apply, paragraph 66 is your reference, and it goes through each CP practice and shows what incentives apply, contract lengths, whether it's in continuous or general, and so on and so forth. Just note though, again, I'll repeat that all safe is now in continuous. So you'll see that all CP 38 offers are in the continuous program. In the notice, it goes on to list some other safe policies, and required management activity is one of them. There is one required management activity that has to be conducted on all safe enrolled acres, and that needs to be included within the proposals. Additional activities are allowed. And so if a sponsor, along with the state FSA office, feels that the targeted species needs more management activities throughout the 10 or 15 year lifespan of the contract, then the proposals can include that. Note that cost share is not authorized for management activities. And the policy reference for management activities is 2CRP paragraph 428. Haying and grazing. Haying and grazing is authorized for safe. And it's very important that the proposals specify if haying and grazing is authorized. Proposals may be more restrictive than the policies in 2CRP Port 19 for haying and grazing, but not less restrictive. So there's a portion within the proposal that we're going to ask you to put in the haying and grazing requirements, and please don't skip that portion. We need it to state whether or not haying and grazing is going to be allowed, if there'll be further restrictions, or if it's not allowed at all. And further restrictions can contain things such as managed haying and grazing is not allowed, but emergency is, and things like that. So keep that in mind, or you can just allow haying and grazing to happen on the safe acres within the project according to Part 19, but we need it specified within the proposals. Permissive and restrictive uses are listed in Part 18 of 2CRP. And proposals also have the opportunity to list if there are other restrictive uses that should be contained within the project. And so review Part 18 of the handbook, and if there are things that need to be included as permissive and restrictive uses that go beyond what's in the handbook, that needs to be included within the proposals. And again, the proposals cannot be less restrictive than what the policies are in 2CRP handbook. Cost share. Safe practices are eligible for 50% cost share to establish the practice. Payment incentive and cost share are authorized to transition at re-enrollment. So if there is a participant that needs to either interseed or reseed to transition into a cover type to align with requirements of the SAFE project, cost share and PIP will be authorized at re-enrollment to do such work. Proposal development. And the points that I've got in this presentation are very abbreviated compared to what's in the notice on the proposal development, but I'll go over a few of the highlights. Proposals may be submitted by any government, nonprofit, or private organization. They're limited to the CP38 and approved sub-practices. We looked at that chart a few slides ago, and those are the practices that are authorized. And so we have to work within that structure. States may have multiple projects, and so you may have noticed on the map that we looked at earlier that many states are managing multiple state safe project at this time. But there's a caution to that, because we can't have two safe projects that are doing the same thing, nor can we have a safe project that's doing the same thing as a current active CREP project in that state. So there needs to be uniqueness to the safe projects. Again, I've got another point on there. Work with your FSA state office. They are definitely your resource in your endeavors to either manage a safe proposal or create a new one. Safe proposal criteria. There's 4 criterias that qualify as, they're kind of the top qualifiers for proposals. And so it must restore habitats of one or more of the following. So safe is targeting habitats for rare, threatened, endangered species, species that have suffered significant population declines, species of greatest conservation need that have been identified according to the state wildlife action plan, and those species that represent social or economic value. So when you're selecting your target species for a safe proposal, that species needs to be able to fit into one of those 4 categories. Practice modifications. We took a look at that. I'll refer back to that chart that had CP38 in it, along with the approved sub-practices. Those sub-practices may be modified to meet the habitat requirements of the target species. Earlier, you may recall that I also emphasized the importance of Exhibit 11 in the handbook. And so those are the rules for each practice. And so those are able to be modified, but they can't be less restrictive. And so take a look at those requirements in 2 CRP Exhibit 11, and there may be additional requirements that need to be applied to help target habitat for the habitat requirements for your targeted species. Some other changes that have happened recently, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, there's been additional conservation practices authorized. As I was reviewing these slides in the notice, I see a mistake that was made. And you might see on the left of your screen, the top left, conservation practice standard, it reads wild habitat planting. And although that kind of sounds cool, but that's really not the practice standard that was authorized. It's wildlife habitat planting. So I apologize for the typo there. But practice standard 420 wildlife habitat planting was a conservation practice standard that NRCS adopted just a few years ago. And it is being now adopted or authorized for use in some of the safe practices. So you'll see that it's now authorized for CP38E, which is grasses, 1s, 2s, 40s, 25s, and 42s. Also, early successional habitat management and development has been approved for CP38E4D and CP38D36. On the early successional habitat management, it's also been authorized that annual plants may be used to help create early successional habitat management conditions. Want to say a thanks to some of the partner biologists that gave a presentation to the Conservation Division in February, highlighting the importance of some species of the use of early successional habitat management strategies, as well as the use of annual plants to create those conditions. Annual plants has not been a cover type that has been used on CRP for a lot of good reasons. Perennial vegetation is what has been traditionally used to protect soil, water, and provide wildlife habitat through CRP. But biologists are now advising the Farm Service Agency that the use of annual plants in some situations and targeted conditions is the right thing to do. So the use of annual plants is restricted only to proposals that include creating early successional habitat. And it must be that practice, the NRCS practice standard 647, is used to create such conditions. It is authorized only for CP 3080. So that's grasses, and 4D, permanent wildlife habitats. So there's only one safe option to use annual plants on. And proposals must include additional information per Exhibit 1, and we'll cover that additional information in just a few slides. New or modified safe proposals. So all active safe projects must be reviewed. And so we're asking FSA states and project sponsors to take out your proposals in your active projects and review them. All safe projects must submit, all active safe projects must submit a modification if the partners want to continue. And so we're asking the projects that are active to be organized in a fashion according to Exhibit 1 that's in the notice, as well as there's a few additional items that we're asking to be submitted as well. It's important with the volume of proposals and projects that are being implemented through SAFE that we receive those proposals in an organized way that we're able to quickly review and understand. And so I hope you can all acknowledge that having those SAFE proposals in a standardized format is beneficial to all. If a state and project wants to be, if a sponsor and a state would like to terminate a project, then we'll need the state executive director to send a memo notifying Conservation Division. We're also asking that the state technical committee review all active and new proposals, and that state committee review and provide recommendation to the Conservation Division and Deputy Administrator Farm Programs. Required information. It's contained in CRP Notice 966, and that's Exhibit 1. And safe proposals, we're asking them to be formatted in a way that's as much summary as possible, using information, using the content in ways of bulleted lists, tables, short narratives. More words isn't necessarily better, but the content is very important. And we're asking that to also be submitted in electronic copy or in Word version. So I've had circled on your screen a portion of this, including the following required information organized with the numbering, titling, and order as shown below. Proposals that do not include required information organized according to the following will not be considered. So we're asking that the information be complete that's contained within the proposals, as well as organized in a certain order. So let's go over that order. Number 1 is the proposal title and sponsor information. So we've got 1.1 proposal title, 1.2 is the primary sponsor organization. 1.3 is that organization's contact information and the point of contact. And 1.4 is any partnering organizations, including support for the proposal. So kind of just highlighting what the title is and who's involved. Portion 2 of the required information is target wildlife species. 2.1 is asking there to be a list of the target wildlife or insect species, and there's a maximum of 5. Following down the list, we're asking for a brief biological description of the target species. And 2.3 are those qualifiers that we mentioned earlier, rare and threatened, species of greatest conservation need, and so on. 3 is a proposal location. Information related to the current and historic range of the target species needs to be included. A description of the ecoregion of the target species that the target species occupies. The state and counties included in the proposal area. I'm going to highlight that one. In the past, we've had proposals submitted that did not have the correct counties included, that weren't matching up correctly with the GIS layers that are submitted. Please take time to check and double check your proposal, that it's got the right counties in it, and then and make sure that jives with the GIS layer that's submitted. We're asking that the HUC code be included, or HUC codes that are included within the project area. The number of acres in the project area. So we're looking at a definition of the size of the area and a description of the land use in the project area. Brief descriptions of existing conditions related to human and environment within the project area, and other information of significant importance in the location. So to carry on with the location, there are some maps that need to be included in PDF format, maps of the historic and target species range, the state and county boundaries, like we talked a little bit ago, again, making sure that that map jives with the list that you've included of your counties, existing habitat types. And you'll see on 3.24 and 3.2.5, we're asking maps of CREP projects in your state and SAFE projects be submitted as well to see if there's any overlap. And if there is overlap, we'll be looking for the uniqueness within the SAFE project as it relates to other active projects in the state currently. So section 4 of the proposal is the proposal description. We're looking for the goal of the project, a list of the practices contained within the project, if there's any additional requirements per each practice, the habitat to be restored, and specifically what the habitat will be providing for the species, what type of life cycle requirements will it provide. And then finally on this screen, you'll see on 4.5 is the required cover type. What cover type will be required in the proposal? Is that trees? Is that a mixture of trees? Is it a monoculture of grass? Is it a diverse native grass and forbs? So please provide descriptions of the required cover type. Going on with proposal descriptions, 4.6 is a description of what the required management activities will be. 4.7 is other efforts going on within the state in a project area that also align with this. So are there other efforts going on to also target the wildlife species that's included within the SAFE proposal? 4.8 is a description of how the proposal aligns with the State Wildlife Action Plan. 4.9 is the haying and grazing requirements. I said earlier that it's really important that you put the haying and grazing requirements. So we're going to be looking for all of this content, but specifically that one. And if we see that proposals do not contain content such as haying, grazing, or any of the other topics or subjects that I've covered here, we'll be sending it back and asking for that information to be included. And haying grazing is specifically important. If it's not in the proposal, it defaults to haying grazing is not allowed, but we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that everybody's got that defined within their project. And 4.10 then is descriptions of the permissive and restricted uses, like we discussed a little bit ago, according to Part 18 of 2 CRP Handbook. I mentioned earlier that if early successional habitat management and the use of annual plants, and that's a big and. So a lot of folks are going to have or may have early successional habitat 647 in their proposal. But if you also have the use of annual plants, we're going to need you to include a little bit additional information. So going down through the list that's on your screen right now, that additional information is: why is use of annual plants beneficial compared to disturbance to stands of perennials to create early successional habitat? Will the project use introduced or native annuals? How often will the annuals be seeded? The percentage of the contracted acres applying the early successional habitat management, the strategy to control soil erosion and noxious weeds in locations where annuals will be used, and then finally, the approved annual plant species. Section 5 of the proposals is the anticipated outcomes. 5.1, safe enrollment acres and number of contract goals to meet the habitat needs. 5.2 is measurable outcomes and timeframes when outcomes would be achieved. A lot of that would be related to the target species and population outcomes. 5.3, describe the benefits of the proposed project. And 5.4, describe how the project will help implement the state wildlife action plan. And 5.5, an estimate of out-of-pocket costs for state, local, and private partners. And finally, the last section of the proposals is outreach. So 6.1 is to describe the public outreach plan, including materials and media. And number 6.2 is also a very important one, a description of the plan to educate state, FSA, NRCS, and partners who will be on boots on the ground administering the program and doing conservation planning for the SAFE project. It's vitally important that those field office employees understand the SAFE project well. On your screen now is Exhibit 2. So we just went through Exhibit 1, which is the contents of the proposals. Exhibit 2 is what needs to be included when the proposal is submitted. A copy of the FSA State Committee minutes, reviewing and recommending the proposal. Copy of the State Technical Committee minutes, also having reviewed the proposal. The State Executive Director's certification that any active SAFE projects and new modified proposals meet the requirements of the notice. So we're asking the SED to certify that the submitted proposals meet the requirements of this notice. Shape files of the proposed project area according to one GIS, Exhibit 31. That's something we're asking our state level FSA personnel to assist with. And so that one GIS Exhibit 31 is something that they would know what the requirements are. Of course, the proposals according to the requirements that we just covered in Exhibit 1. And then the 2 CRP amendment that is required, including modifications to 2 CRP Exhibit 11. So what that is the CRP practices that you'll be using need to be written up into an amendment that explains the SAFE requirements and the changes within that practice. And that 2 CRP amendment needs to be included with the SAFE proposal. So deadlines. It started yesterday, April 25th, and we're asking that proposals and modifications, new proposals and active contracts and modifications be submitted by June 24th. And there are 4 bullets on your screen. We've covered those already, but those are the actions that need to happen within that time frame. So state office actions. These are things that we're asking FSA state offices to do when they're working with partners submitting modified or new SAFE proposals. Modify all active SAFE projects to ensure compliance with the Exhibit 1. So they're again organizing any active SAFE projects to meet all of the content requirements, organized in the way according to Exhibit 1. If a sponsor, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to say it again, if a project is going to be terminated, we're asking that the state executive director send a memo stating that it will be terminated. David Taylor is going to be our point of contact for submitting such items. I'm your point of contact for questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. When it's time to submit your proposals, please submit them to David Taylor with the contact information you have on your screen. Okay, so once SAFE projects are approved, all the approved projects, we're going to be reaching out to the state offices and asking the state offices to coordinate with the sponsors as well as FSA's communications professionals to create a fact sheet for that. And so we're going to have more information that'll come out on that shortly, so hold tight on that. But in the past, we asked that the fact sheets be submitted with the proposal, but we're not asking that anymore. We've got a great communication staff at Farm Service Agency, and they've committed to help us out and help the projects out with the development of a fact sheet. I'm excited about that, and there'll be more to come on that. Okay, so that's through the slides. That's some of the recent happenings with SAFE. And so now is time to take some questions. But before we do, I just want to remind you again that your point of contact is your state farm service agency. I'm always here to answer questions too, but please, your folks at the Farm Service Agency state office, they're your friends in this effort, and please make sure you include them with all your questions and make contact with them as soon as you can. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen here as we move to some of the questions related to where the recording is going to be posted. And if you've got any questions about the recording, there is an email address on there as well.
Great, Alan. We do have some questions in the chat. The first question is from Carly. Is the West eligible? Why are California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona not engaged? Todd did respond. Carly, yes, state decision to, it is a state decision to apply for SAFE or not. Do you have anything to add to that, Ellen?
I don't. Cropland is eligible according to paragraph 151, and any state that has a sponsor is eligible. And so, yeah, there are 35 states that are participating, and some states aren't participating at this time. But if you are in one of those states, I would encourage you to reach out to your Farm Service Agency and find the person that has responsibilities for Conservation Reserve Program and discuss the options and possibilities with them.
Wonderful. Our next question is from Morgan regarding marginal pasture land. Does the species of interest have to be federally listed, or do state lands qualify as well as for justification of the inclusion of the land use?
Yeah, species of identified species of greatest conservation need by the State Wildlife Action Plan could be reasons to utilize marginal pasture land. Before you go into creating a proposal to include marginal pasture land, let's have a discussion about that to make sure that we're all in agreement on the target species as well as the use of marginal pasture land.
Excellent. Our next question is from Michael. Can the geographic scope of a proposal be outside the geographic area of current SAFE projects?
Yeah, definitely. So SAFE project locations can be outside and should be, they don't have to be, but I would expect that if you currently have projects going on in your state and you're thinking about submitting a new proposal, that it'd be likely that that new proposal would be in a location outside of the current active project. If it's inside the current active project, as I said earlier, we're just going to want to look for the uniqueness of why it's different and why there needs to be another project within the same location area. But to answer it, yeah, definitely. It does not have to be within the current active project areas.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Matt. If resubmitting an active SAFE with no proposed changes to the target area, do you still need to submit the shape files?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Ray. What is the process if there is not a scheduled state technical committee meeting or FSA review meeting during the timeline? This timeline is too short for the review requirements.
I understand. And I also understand that in some states, the state committees are not yet established. So reach out. Let's not make that a barrier. And I will work with the Conservation Division and Deputy Administrator Farm Programs to find solutions for those cases where you're not able to get those meetings prior to the June 24th deadline date.
Excellent. We do have a question from Linda. Will you be providing your slides? And I would note that the slides and the recordings will be available on the outreach webinar page. Please allow us 2 days to get that posted. I hope to have it posted by Thursday. So just watch that website. And we do have yes, we have an from Jenny. Addition to Matt's question, if nothing changed, do we still need to submit our state amendment?
We're asking that they do get submitted. I know that's a time investment, but we're asking for a little bit different or a few additional items within the proposal requirements, as well as them to be organized in the way of Exhibit 1. So we're asking that this is a good time for everybody to take a look at their SAFE proposals. It's bought between continuous and general and back to continuous. We need to make sure that those references are corrected, and just making sure that all of the content in the SAFE proposal aligns with current policy, current incentives, and there again, organized in the way with the content that we've got in Exhibit 1. So the answer is yes, we're asking that all active proposals be reorganized and submitted.
Thank you. Our next question is from David. Historically, there was interest in SAFE in places like Utah and Nevada, but it didn't progress to a formal proposal. Both Utah and Nevada thoughts were, I'm sorry, I can't read the end of that. Sorry, David, I can't see the end of that comment. It sounds like it was a comment. The next question is from Todd. Exhibit 1, 3.2.4 CREP map with SAFE map. Can states get the CREP data from FSA?
Yes.
With no actual locations of CREP sites.
Sorry for pulling the trigger a little bit earlier on that answer, Jennifer, but yeah, the answer is yes. Please reach out to your state for those GIS layers. And there again, this is, I made it sound so like sponsors do this and states do that. And really, according to my experience, it's a coordinated effort between FSA, the sponsor, and really NRCS gets involved a lot too. So, when we're talking GIS shape files and putting together these proposals, it's a team effort, right? And so make sure you're coordinating with FSA, NRCS, sponsors, partners at the state level to make this happen.
Thank you. Kristen is asking if we can provide a list of the 35 states that have SAFE projects currently.
Certainly, yeah, for sure. And I think the best way would be to just email you that list. I don't know that I'll have a place to post that for those that are attending this, but Jennifer, if you could help me capture that contact information, and I'll get that list and send it out.
We will do that. Thank you. Okay, our next question is from David. Can you go into detail regarding overlap between SAFE and CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program? In several states, CREP and SAFE areas overlap, but look at different practices. For the most part, CREP is water quality centric. SAFE has limited activity in buffer and wetlands, with the exception of migratory birds, AFE in Kansas and Nebraska.
Yeah, David, I think David is a colleague of mine. I think he kind of answered the question within the question right there. And usually CREP is a little bit different, right? A lot of times CREP is more water quality centered and SAFE is more wildlife habitat centered, but want to make sure that we don't have two projects that are essentially applying the same CP practices for the same reasons in the same areas. I don't know that there'll be very many instances of that, but it is Conservation Division's decision that they want to make sure that that doesn't happen as them being stewards of the program. And so we're asking that not only active SAFE projects, but active CREP projects also be included in the proposals, showing that they are for something different. And the proposal is unique and not just doing the same thing of current active projects.
Thank you, Alan. The next is from Todd. Exhibit 13.1.6.2. Do you want permanently protected habitat? And what defines existing WL habitat?
We'll let y'all are very knowledgeable biologists, and I'll let you define what that current habitat is. It's too broad for me to be able to define that from a national level. And so how does your proposal work in with current habitat conditions? Maybe there really isn't very good habitat conditions in locations that need to be created. Maybe there's already a moderate level of habitat conditions that this SAFE project will add to. In that section in the 3.1.6.2, we're asking for the description of that, of how will the proposal and acres included within that aid to the current habitat conditions.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another from Eric. Expired county CRP cap waiver issues in critical, threatened, and endangered habitats have left a surplus of CRP acres. What is FSA's plan to address this?
Hold on, I got to think about this one a little bit. I don't have an answer for that one right now, Eric. Sorry very much. We'll capture, and again, Jennifer, you could help me capture Eric's contact information. I'll follow up with you.
We will do that. Thank you. A question from Kevin. How does the estimated cost from partners factor into the proposal? It's not matched, but does FSA look at offers with more, I'm sorry, with more partner dollars?
Not necessarily, Kevin. That section of it too, we discussed having that in there or not, because it's not an easy number to come up with, right? I mean, I'm not expecting you guys to have an exact number, but just an acknowledgement that there will be input from other partners. There'll be input from partners. And so we wanted to acknowledge that within it. Don't make it into a long economics exercise, but give us an estimate of what you think other outside sources will be aiding monetarily into the project. And not necessarily, I'm sorry, Jennifer, I just want to end Kevin's statement. I don't know that FSA will be prefacing one project over the other based on that content.
Thank you. A question from Jenny. When submitting our state CREP shapefile with our state safe documentation, are we also to include our state CREP proposal and state CREP amendments?
No.
Okay. And then another final question from Forrest. Where might I find limitations for use of the funding when it comes to obtaining support from the other agency resources?
Give me just a second to think about this one. So Forrest, and you could come off or type to clarify, but I think what you're saying is, where do I find limitations based on what other funding sources can be used in the SAFE project? And so 2CRP handbook is your first reference on what other funding sources can be used. And what it really boils down to a lot of is we can't use other federal funding sources on the same land to do the same thing. But state and partner dollars are okay to use to help support these projects. But there's a little bit more details to that too. So if we need to have a phone conversation about that for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. But your first reference is 2CRP handbook.
Thank you. We do have one more question from Ray. To be clear, all current and pending 2022 safe acres will be maintained and obligated under previously defined approved safes?
True.
Okay, very good. That concludes our questions. Alan, I will turn it over you to end the presentation.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to again provide a big thanks to Jennifer Cole and Kanika Davis, who helped host this. It is made possible by them. And so thank you very much. And again, thank you for everybody taking time this afternoon to talk about SAFE and the Conservation Reserve Program with me. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Jennifer, do you mind if we give it just a few seconds to see if anybody wants to come off mic and ask a question?
Oh, sure. And also we do have another question from Matt. How could the listing of the lesser prairie chicken affect LEPC safes?
Well, I'm not necessarily prepared to answer how lesser prairie chicken, if the lesser prairie chicken becomes listed and the impacts based on that. But I can say that SAFE is a great opportunity to try to get a project going in states, if you don't have one already for the lesser prairie chicken, to try to provide some critical habitat to a species that we see populations in decline.
Great. We don't have any other questions, but if anybody would like to come off of mute and make a comment or another question, please do so.
Alan, this is Josh Griffin in Indiana. I'm the Farm Bill coordinator here, and I had a couple of questions that I wondered if you had time to answer.
Yeah, you bet, Josh.
So I guess I read through the notice, of course, and obviously I paid attention to your presentation today. In your presentation today, it seemed more stringent or fairly stringent in regards to the submission of safe proposals. In Indiana, we have 4 safe proposals. They followed the guidelines in 2020. Of the 4, we'd like to update 1 really with some substantive changes in regards to early successional habitat for northern bobwhite quail.
Okay.
How important is it that these new safe proposals rigidly follow the outline that you went over today? For example, I listened to your presentation today. 90 to 95% of the information that you outlined that's needed from I believe exhibit 1 are in our current safe proposals. There may be a map about the current range of the species or a relation to CREP priority area that maybe FSA can provide the shape files on. So there's a few things that may be needed, outcomes, things like that. And I have no issue updating those proposals in that regard. Do we need to rigidly follow the outlines of your presentation and notice 966 in regards to the proposal outline? So for example, if 4.4 is in 4.1 and vice versa, is that grounds for dismissing the proposal?
Well, Josh, we're with the volume of proposals that we're managing, we are asking that the content be standardized. And we are asking that all active, if there's very minor changes or hardly any changes to the active proposal, we're still asking that it be submitted with the content and the organization that's in that exhibit 1. And for proposals that, like you stated, already have pretty much all the content, just needs to be organized according to the way exhibit 1 is. I'm hoping that that isn't a large time commitment, but I also want to identify that it is a time commitment. And if a state or a project does not have a person to do that or no time to do it, let's discuss it. Let's talk about that. But the expectation is that we see all the current active proposals come in according to the requirements in exhibit 1.
And that's exactly where I was going with it. Is we have 1 proposal that needs substantive changes, and I don't want it to suffer to do a writing exercise on the other 3 proposals to get exactly what we had out of it. And that's kind of where we're at with the timeline that's there.
I understand that. And so let's shoot for getting them organized according to exhibit 1. And if it becomes a barrier that we can't overcome, we'll deal with that. We'll find some alternatives. But please work with us to try to get your active projects organized according to exhibit 1.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Alan, we do have another question. What is FSA looking for with 5.1 and 5.2 safe enrollment acres, contract numbers, and timeframes? This is going to depend on commodity prices and landowner interest. So just a best guess?
Yep, pretty much. Todd, just what are the goals? What's the project trying to get at for an enrollment? We're asking for some thought to be put into what's it going to take to achieve the goals of the target species that this proposal is trying to achieve. And so we know that there's market impacts, market influences that impact enrollment, a lot of different things. But truly, what is it that what is the proposal trying to accomplish? How many contracts is that going to take, and how many acres is that going to take? And yeah, it is a guess. It's an estimate, but I think it's a very important part of it to understand how many acres need to be enrolled to achieve the target that the proposal is trying to achieve, and how many contracts is that going to take. So put your best guess to it. Again, it doesn't need to be an activity that takes hours and hours, but some thought does need to be put into it on what it's going to take for CRP enrollment to provide habitat for the target species in a volume that's impactful.
Alan, that concludes our questions.
Super. Thanks, Jennifer. Let's give it just a few seconds to see if anybody's got a verbal question.
We have a written question.
Okay.
FSA does limited outreach for safe acres with landowners. Is there a focus by FSA to provide better information to landowners?
Well, I think FSA tries very hard and is successful at providing information about SAFE and other CRP opportunities to landowners. And there is a focused effort, certainly, for SAFE projects, and a lot of that comes in coordination with Farm Service Agency and the sponsor. But this time, I think we have a unique opportunity in that we have some communication specialists that are going to assist with the development of the fact sheets for the SAFE projects. And so I don't want to say that that's a different focus, but just a unique opportunity. But I feel that outreach efforts, although always could be increased in volume, FSA is always trying to work, and USDA is working very hard to make sure that our farmers, landowners, and ranchers are aware of all program opportunities.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat unless anyone would like to make a comment or a last minute question.
Hey, Alan, this is Todd. I'll ask you one more
Okay.
regarding Exhibit 1. You asked for a current and historic range of target species with up to 5 species in a proposal. So that could be 5 maps doubled for current historic range. You could show them on one map, but many species may not have a historic map. So do we just list not available for that? And then you also asked for the ecoregion. What are you looking for there? The bird conservation region, or what data do you want there?
Okay, yeah. Some proposals will contain multiple species. A lot of them are on single species. So historic and current ranges, the more species included within the proposal, yeah, the more maps you're going to have for their historic and current range. But if data isn't very available for the historic range, I get that. It could either be made a note that that's not available, but I think really for the most part, a lot of the species, we have a pretty good idea of what the historic range of that species was. And so if that's a barrier, if that just is not data that's not available, we can work through that, not a problem. And we'll just default back down to the current range. Let me think, Todd, what was the second thing that you just asked? I was working so hard at giving you an answer, I forgot the second part of your question.
What are you looking for with ecoregions?
Oh yeah, right. So yeah, it could be the bird descriptions of region, but really what we're looking for is, are we talking tallgrass prairie region? Are we talking pothole wetland region? Deciduous forest type habitat. So, ecoregion, what type of habitat, what's that ecoregion that you're trying to replicate through the SAFE project? In a broad term,
And that's it, Alan. That's all we have.
Excellent. I hear no one chiming in. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you all very much.